I never thought the end would begin with the smell of burning plastic. But there I was, standing barefoot on the cold tiles of our designer kitchen, watching the last remnants of my passport curl into blackened ribbons on the marble countertop. The culprit? My wife, Jasmine, sitting across the room like nothing had happened, legs crossed, silk robe draped carelessly over her shoulder, sipping her matcha latte with a smug little smile. "You won't need that anymore," she said, without looking up at her phone. "Stay home, Atlas. Be a good dad. Let real people live a little." She booked her ticket to the Amalfi Coast, while I stood there stunned. Not with me, with Colton, her life mentor, a walking cologne ad with a leased Ferrari and no moral compass. She thought I didn't know. Thought I was too wrapped up in server, security audits, and back-end architecture to notice the late-night texts, the sudden yoga retreats, the weekly facials for someone who never used to care about skincare. But I knew. What Jasmine didn't know was that just 48 hours earlier, I had closed the deal of my lifetime. The quiet, low-burn tech platform that I had built from scratch, TerraVault, was acquired for $1.8 billion by a global data firm, all in cash, all under NDA. I've been planning to tell her over dinner this weekend, maybe even fly us out to that little villa in Tuscany we once sketched on a napkin when we were broke and dreaming. But Jasmine had already made her choice. She didn't just burn a document. She burned trust. She burned the man I used to be. What she saw was still the guy patching servers at 3 a.m. in gym shorts and uncut hair. But what I'd become, what I really was someone she'd never seen coming. A man with a plan, a man with options, a man with fire of his own. I didn't say a word. I watched her scroll through vacation packages with Colton, sipping the last of her drink. Then I turned and walked upstairs. Not defeated, but awakened. What happens next won't be loud, it won't be messy, but it will be final. She burned my passport to keep me from flying, but she just gave me a reason to soar. That night, I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I didn't even look back at Jasmine. I just walked. No confrontation, no drama, just a bag pulled from beneath the garage steps, tucked behind a stack of dusty paint cans and an old yoga mat she never used. She never looked there. Why would she? That was my corner of the house, like everything else she didn't care about. Inside the bag was everything I needed. A burner phone, backup ID under the name I used back in college, Cal Stone, a stash of cash, and the spare key to the black Taycan parked at my office garage. She didn't even know I owned that car. She thought I still took Uber to meetings, thought I was small. But I'd been planning for this escape for a long time, long before she lit the match. The city felt different that night. I wasn't running. I was rising. Downtown lights blurred past as I slid into the underground garage of a discreet business hotel on East 42nd. They knew me only as Cal. No record of Atlas Dean, no marital ties, no traceable cards. I checked into a suite with glass walls, minimalist decor, and the kind of silence that made you feel rich. The first thing I did was call Nora, my attorney. Sharp, private, and someone I'd kept on retainer ever since Jasmine started asking too many questions about our financials. "She burned my passport," I said, calmly. Nora didn't even pause. "Then we burn her access." Within 2 hours, every joint account was frozen. Her access to the home equity line? Gone. The Tesla Model X she adored for brunches with Colton? Disabled remotely. I even cut her off from the streaming services she used as white noise while scrolling influencer drama. Jasmine thought she'd grounded me, trapped me in domesticity. Instead, she lit the rocket beneath my feet. I poured myself a drink from the minibar. Whiskey. Neat. It burned, but not as hard as the reality that had scorched through my chest all day. 15 years, building a company with my bare hands, while she sold curated images of our perfect life online. And the whole time, she was plotting an exit strategy with a personal trainer who wore fake gold chains and misused words like synergy. My phone buzzed. It was Nora again. All accounts secure. Property deeds are in motion. Her name's being removed where applicable. Custody plans? We'll handle that after. I nodded into the quiet. Then I opened my laptop, the one she thought I used for silly side projects. In reality, it held encrypted documentation for TerraVault's acquisition, NDAs, offshore routing files, and a timeline for transitioning my leadership role quietly. I wasn't just a man with a windfall. I was a man with leverage. Jasmine thought she was running off into the Mediterranean sunset while leaving a broken man behind. But what she didn't realize was I'd already left emotionally months ago. The betrayal? That just made it official. The whiskey glass clinked as I set it on the marble. I stood, walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, and looked out at the skyline. It wasn't just a view. It was a blueprint. A reminder that I didn't need her, didn't need anyone who looked at me like a stepping stone. I sent one final message before I shut down my burner. You wanted a vacation, now you've got one. I'm done being your background noise. I turned the phone off and tossed it into the hotel trash. No more games, no more trying to be enough for someone who saw me as invisible. Jasmine lit a fire to control me, but all she really did was unleash me. That night in the penthouse wasn't about indulgence. It was the quiet between two storms. The city below buzzed, unaware that a man once burned had now begun to forge something far stronger from the ashes. The scorched passport no longer symbolized confinement. It marked the beginning of something deliberate. I woke before dawn, my mind sharper than it had been in months. The bed felt too large, too crisp, but also free. No bell, no performance, just the sound of distant traffic and the whisper of rain on the windows. I brewed coffee, dark and bitter, and sat at the desk where I had spread out everything the night before. Eyeless texts, screenshots of Noah and Belle's scheming, security cam footage, expense records, all tagged and ordered. This wasn't just personal, it was legal ammunition. And now, I had a plan. The first step, cut her off. Not in anger, but with precision. I called Juno again, my lawyer. She was already up. I said, she's going to wake up soon. I want everything locked before she tries anything. It's already done. Accounts frozen, cards canceled. The house title? Moved to the LLC we set up months ago. She's out. I sipped coffee. She'll come back. She'll come back to a different kingdom, one she no longer rules. I couldn't help but laugh. For years, I let Belle shape me, polish me, package me, control how I looked, who I spoke to, even what dreams were acceptable. But she never bothered to look beneath, and that blind spot would now become her downfall. Next, allies. I dialed Theo, my old business partner, the only one who'd stuck with me during the leanest years of the startup. He answered with a groggy laugh. You vanished, man. I figured you were in Monaco by now. Not yet, but it's coming. I told him everything. Belle's affair, the passport, the trip to Santorini, and then I told him the real reason I called. I need to control the narrative. Quietly.
I want the sale kept under wraps for now. No press, no noise. You're planning something. I'm rebuilding. Not just a company, a life. Say the word, I'll handle the press blackout. While he worked on discretion, I reached back out to Isla, the woman scorned by Noah, quiet, observant, and now furious. She agreed to meet again. This time, I had questions, and she had passwords. We sat at the same corner cafe. She slid her phone across the table before I even asked. Noah's cloud. You'll want the last month. I opened it and nearly dropped the phone. Dozens of screenshots, chat logs, receipts. Noah and Belle had been planning this for months. They laughed at me in text threads, called me the money tree, the ghost of a man, talked about draining me, framing me, and how I was too soft to fight back. They had no idea. By midday, I had forwarded everything to Juno. I told her, this isn't just divorce. This is fraud, conspiracy, and theft. Let's bury them, she replied. Isla, sitting across from me, reached for her coffee. So what's next? I looked her in the eye. I want the world to know who they are, not through screaming or slander, but through facts, the kind you can't deny. Isla nodded slowly. Let's make sure they never forget. And so I began the second phase. Control the damage, reclaim my power. This wasn't revenge, it was redefinition. The man they thought they burned was still here, only now he was cold, calculated, and impossibly calm. That night, I poured a glass of whiskey and watched the city again. The kids were safe, the accounts were locked, the enemies were exposed, and for the first time in years, I wasn't surviving Belle. I was outgrowing her. As the sun began to set behind the skyline, casting golden streaks across the penthouse windows, I stood silently with Isla's phone still in my hand, her voice echoing in my ears. Let's make sure they never forget. Those weren't just words. They were a contract, unspoken but binding. That night, while Belle and Noah were laughing over wine on some overpriced balcony in Santorini, I got to work launching Foundry, the digital platform I'd been quietly developing for years. It started as a passion project, something raw and real. A space for creators tired of manufactured engagement, inflated follower counts, and brand deals that only served image, not impact. Now, it became my weapon, a direct challenge to the world Belle had lived in. The next morning, I called Aura, an investigative journalist I'd helped once back in the early days of my startup. I told her I had a story. She didn't hesitate. We met in a quiet cafe downtown, and I laid it out, not as a man scorned, but as a case study in how digital lives could become cages of control. I want it anonymous, I told her, for now. The truth matters more than the names. She leaned in. This is going to hit hard. You sure you're ready for what comes next? I didn't flinch. She burned my passport to clip my wings. I'm just learning how to fly without asking for permission. The article went live within 48 hours, under the headline, When Influence Becomes Control, the quiet abuse behind the hashtag. It didn't name Belle, but it didn't have to. The breadcrumbs were clear to anyone who had followed her curated digital life. It spoke of financial manipulation, emotional neglect, the subtle violence of being erased inside your own home while pretending everything was fine on camera. It was a controlled fire, and the internet is always dry kindling. Brands pulled back, fast. One by one, the beauty line, the yoga apparel, the designer luggage company, gone. The affiliate links disappeared from her stories. Comments on her latest post, something vapid about healing energy in Greece, turned hostile. Didn't your husband build your whole lifestyle? Real ones don't need to fake it. Wow, this post aged poorly. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. I just watched as the illusion cracked and crumbled from within. Meanwhile, Noah's firm had gone silent. Juno confirmed that Isla's tip-off had triggered an emergency ethics review. His corporate card was suspended. His accounts audited. He landed back in New York early and didn't even make it home before getting served a temporary suspension notice. His world was unraveling, just like Belle's. And Renee? She landed in Venice with her pink designer suitcase, expecting a luxurious suite and a doting lover. Instead, she found an empty bank account, a canceled hotel reservation, and a ghost of a man whose career was sinking faster than her own. Her first message to me came that night. "Where's the money? The house? Why can't I get in?" I didn't answer. Then came another. "You've ruined everything." No, I hadn't. I just removed the filters, handed her the mirror she'd spent a decade avoiding. And still she didn't get it. I continued working on Foundry, not just as a platform, but as a statement. It was picking up traction. Developers were reaching out, authentic creators were buzzing, even investors, quiet ones, wanted in. Theo handled the back end. Isla helped with branding. She had a good eye for truth. I think that surprised her, too. Juno texted me, "You want me to go public with the footage?" "Not yet," I typed. "Let the silence do the damage." Let her scroll through her phone and watch her empire vanish without warning. Let Noah sit in a corporate office facing HR while Isla's voice played back in his head. Let them both realize that I hadn't just survived, I'd thrived. Belle burned my passport, thinking she'd leave me stranded. But I'd built a new path, one lined with truth, with power, and with a legacy she could never touch. I wasn't just escaping anymore. I was building, and I wasn't doing it alone. As I sat back in the quiet of the penthouse, the city lights flickering like a new constellation of possibilities, I thought about what Isla had said over coffee. We were never small. They just made us feel that way. And now, we were finally walking tall.
The aquarium was cool and dim, filled with the soft hum of filters and the bright shimmer of tanks glowing with marine life. I stood near the giant tank where stingrays glided across the sand like lazy clouds, waiting as the nanny led my 2 kids toward me. Their faces lit up as they spotted me. No fanfare, no questions, just arms flung around my waist and laughter that sounded like home. We wandered through the jellyfish exhibit, their pulses casting blue ripples across our skin. My daughter clutched my hand while my son bombarded me with shark facts. It wasn't a grand gesture or a million-dollar moment. It was better, real, honest, grounded. This was the first time in years I felt like a father, not just a financial backer in a glossy, curated life. Renee used to say I wasn't fun enough for them. She wanted beach brunches and family photos and color-coordinated outfits. But here, under the soft lights and next to a sea turtle the size of a trash can, my kids weren't looking for Instagram. They were looking for me. And they found me. "Can we go to Tokyo next spring?" my son asked, eyes wide as he stared at the Japanese spider crabs. I smiled. "Only if you promise to try sushi." They both groaned and giggled, and I knew the answer was yes. That night, after I'd dropped them off and kissed their foreheads, I sat at the kitchen table in my penthouse with a glass of whiskey and a laptop in front of me. A document was open. Unsigned, the final draft of the Eleanor Fund. Named after my grandmother, Eleanor had raised my mother alone after my grandfather passed. A quiet woman with hands always dusted in flour and wisdom that never needed volume to command respect. Renee used to call her quaint,
like legacy was an old coat to be donated. But tonight, Eleanor would live on. The Eleanor Fund would offer grants to single parents in tech, those juggling code with bedtime stories, debugging apps between school runs, and hiding tears behind Slack status updates. I wasn't just signing a document. I was planting a tree. I clicked Submit, and just like that, a piece of my past became a promise for someone else's future. Meanwhile, across town, or perhaps even closer, Renee was spiraling. She'd tried to bluff her way back into the house last week, showed up in sunglasses and stilettos like the world still turned for her. But the locks had been changed. Her keycard wouldn't work. The doorman ignored her. She banged on the glass door, shouting my name. The neighbors watched. Some filmed. It didn't matter. I saw it all from the security feed on my phone, sitting in the warmth of my home with jazz playing low in the background. Her voice, shrill and cracked, echoed from the speakers. "You can't do this to me." But I could, and I did. I watched for a moment as she sank onto the porch, her designer luggage tipped over beside her, her tears smudging yesterday's makeup. And then I did what I should have done years ago. I turned off the phone. It wasn't anger, it wasn't cruelty, it was peace. The past year had been a crucible. I'd been forged by betrayal, but not consumed by it. I'd found clarity in the ruins and rebuilt something stronger, something real. Foundry, the platform, was gaining traction. We hit 100,000 users that week. Investors were calling. Even Theo said the buzz felt like early Facebook, but cleaner, more honest. Isla was thriving too. Her own small startup focused on financial literacy for young women was blowing up thanks to some of the resources I'd funneled her way. She texted me one night. "You saved more than just yourself." Maybe, maybe not. But I'd stopped being the man who needed to prove it. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a father, a builder, a quiet storm. As I leaned back in my chair that night, the city glowing beyond the window, I realized I didn't need Renee's recognition, or revenge, or a headline. I had freedom. And that was everything.
1 year later, I stood on a quiet hill in Kyoto with my kids beside me, watching the cherry blossoms drift through the spring air like whispers of everything we'd let go. I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. Not about Renee, not about Noah, not about the burned passport or the smirk that once made my blood boil. I was thinking about peace, about presence, about the sound of my daughter laughing as she tried to catch petals in her palms, and my son asking if we could eat ramen for the 3rd time that day. We had made it. The Eleanor Fund was not only funding tech programs across 4 cities now, it had become a beacon for second chances, for people like me, who had been broken and underestimated, then quietly rebuilt stronger than before. I no longer introduced myself with numbers or titles. When asked, I simply said, "I'm a builder of things that matter." And Foundry, the platform built from my heartbreak, it had become something greater than even I imagined. A place where voices once drowned by curated lies could rise, where people told raw, real stories and found connection, not judgment. Renee? Last I heard, she tried rebranding on social media, but the article and the fallout never quite let her recover. She was a cautionary tale now, not a celebrity. Noah?
disappeared into obscurity. And I felt nothing. No smugness, no regret. Because the truth is, when you stop needing validation from those who betrayed you, you finally begin to live. I used to think power meant control. Now I know it means freedom. Freedom to hold your children without shame. Freedom to laugh without bitterness. Freedom to look in the mirror and say, I came back whole. So, if you're reading this, wondering whether healing is possible after someone tries to destroy your worth, know this: it is. Some fires aren't meant to burn you down. They're meant to light the way forward. Emoji. If this story made you feel something, tell us in the comments. What would you do if someone tried to erase your identity? Starting Bing. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of quiet power, redemption, and emotional justice.